Hello and welcome to today's webinar in partnership with Husky Technologies, hosted by Packaging Europe. Today we'll explore how to build more sustainable molding operations step by step. My name is Elisabeth Skoda. I'm the editor-at-large here at Packaging Europe. For those of you unfamiliar with Packaging Europe, we are the leading intelligence resource for packaging professionals around the world, via our magazine and website, as well as online and in-person events such as the Sustainability Awards and Sustainable Packaging Summit. We deliver daily news content, authoritative comment and analysis, case studies, and high-profile interviews with leading industry players. And that way we enable communication across the packaging value chain. For today's webinar, we are joined by Steve Koenig, who is Director of Business Development at Husky Technologies. And a bit more about the webinar today. Being sustainable in molding operations isn't just important to meet regulatory requirements, but also to future-proof your business. Whether it's designing and producing a new sustainable food or beverage pack, or optimizing existing equipment, opening a new facility, or processing more rPET material, it's key to understand how to maximize sustainability in molding operations. In today's webinar, our speaker, Steve Koenig, will explain how brands and producers are leveraging the industry's most innovative strategies, industry-leading technologies, and proven solutions to enhance sustainability and reduce environmental impact while maintaining productivity and part quality. Steve will talk you through how to build sustainability into your molding system from the ground up. He'll discuss step-by-step strategies for transforming existing operations, explain practical approaches for successful rPET processing, and discuss real-world case studies of successful sustainability implementations. You'll also learn how to leverage Husky's complete system solutions for long-term success. Before I hand over to Steve in a moment, just a bit of housekeeping. There are 15 minutes at the end of this webinar reserved for a Q&A, and using the chat facility, please direct message us with your questions, and I can put them to the presenter at the end of this session. You can do this throughout the entire webinar, and we'll try to get as many of your questions answered as possible. And for any technical questions or issues, please select the support button, which you will see on the left-hand side of your screen. So with that, without further ado, I'd like to hand over to Steve for his presentation.
Thank you, Elizabeth. Thanks for that fantastic introduction. And welcome, everyone. Presumably speaking to the European audience, so good afternoon. But this is a global event, so if there's anybody listening at nighttime, good evening, and of course, good morning to anyone who's here on the eastern side. So I sit at our corporate headquarters, which is just outside of Toronto in Canada. So thank you for joining this webinar, and I'm excited to talk to all of you about how you could integrate sustainability into your molding operations. So I've broken the presentation down into 4 segments. And I just kind of highlighted here, we're going to talk about some of the global challenges, because if we think about what's going on in the world today, there's a lot of external forces that are driving businesses to think differently. We'll talk about how sustainability can also be an advantage as to how you're to make improvements for your injection molding process. Then some sustainable molding markers as to how we would achieve that from a hardware perspective. And then getting into some real world results, which would be a few case studies that I can share, examples of companies that we've worked with and how they've transformed their business. So getting into it, I'm going to focus on 3 areas when we talk about trends. And these are probably the most consistent themes that many of you have been listening or hearing about. It's energy, sustainability, and labor. And those are the most 3 questions that come up when we're talking to our customers, and you know, they're asking what can they do about it. So if we talk about energy, I just have some graphs here from around the world, and it's very consistent from where you are. But the message is, you know, the demand for energy continues to go up. Yes, we saw a drop just before COVID, and then it spiked back up. But what we can see on the red trailing edges is that the demand is higher than it was in 2020, and of course that demand is going to continue, and they're expecting about 3 to 4% annually. So always a demand on energy. And then when we talk about demand on energy, well, what does that really mean? Generally, it's price. And again, here we're showing some historical view on price over the past 6 years. And we can see pre-pandemic levels, but where we are on the right-hand side of the chart, as we're getting into 25, we don't have the numbers for 24 yet, but the bottom line is pricing for electricity, for energy continues to go up. So that's a concern. And if we think about injection molding, injection molding is a heavy consumer of energy, whether it's the primary equipment or the secondary equipment, chillers, air compressors. Energy is a big concern that needs to be managed properly. And we'll get into it as we go along, but that's really where Husky has some experience and can help. If we look specifically at Europe, we can see the breakdown between the different countries, how much they're paying per kilowatt hour. But what's most important is when we look at the total operational cost, energy is, I think, the third largest lever when it comes to running your operations. Resin, of course, being the largest contributor, anywhere from 70 to 85%. But energy is a big player, and that's all your electrical, for your water, for your air, running the machine for heats. So that's an area where a lot of people are concentrated on and looking for opportunities to make improvements. And I'll get into some of those areas as to where there's opportunities for energy savings. Husky, being a global company, we try to have a global view as to what's happening around the world with respect to legislation, specifically rPET targets. We have it mapped out depending where you are around the world. And again, if you're not certain what's happening in your country, your region, by all means, you can reach out to us and we'd be more than happy to help out. Okay. So specifically to Europe, PPWR, so the packaging and packaging waste regulation, is coming into full force, and it's broken down into 8 categories listed down below, but we can see that recycled contents, number 4, is a big one in line with everywhere else. But their approach is much more aggressive. They're looking for extended producer responsibility, things like lightweighting, how can I use less plastic, obviously recycled content, deposit return systems. So a lot of this is creating confusion, specifically when it comes to beverage packaging, and just trying to understand and navigate through the regulation as it comes into force. Again, we have a team that is looking at this on a regular basis, and by all means reach out to us and we can help you navigate that. So on top of that, the brands themselves have also made commitments to recycled content. And here's just some example of some of the larger brands that you'd be familiar with. So outside of legislation that's occurring geographically, the brands themselves are committing to recycled content. And we'll get into it a little bit more, but recycled material comes with its own complexity and challenges. Number one, just trying to source it, get a clean stream. And the pricing, depending where you are in the world, pricing on rPET can vary drastically from anywhere from a 30% premium over virgin to up to 80 or 90% premium. So this in itself, pricing, the economic value proposition, is one challenge, but then sourcing the material and ensuring you get a consistent feedstock of material, because batch to batch materials can be different, and they are, and I'll talk about that a little bit later, but that can be a challenge as how you integrate that into your existing operation. So outside of legislation, and I'm gonna move a bit faster here because we lost time, skilled workers, and this is not new. This has been around probably for the last 6 or 7 years. We're finding that the demographic of people in our industry is just not there. People are looking for different types of jobs. They're not looking necessarily into factories. So what does that mean? Just maintaining your operations, running the equipment, having skilled people to run that equipment is becoming more and more of a challenge. That's one of the things that Husky's recognized. And as we develop our products, we're trying to take into account of how do we take the skill out of the individual and implement some of those skill sets into the equipment so that it becomes easier and requiring less of experts, let's say, to run the equipment. You still may need experts to maintain the equipment, but again, the functionality of turning that equipment on and off is really what it's coming down to. So we're helping not just through our equipment, but really understanding what our customers are going through and how we can help offset some of that constraints. And again, depending where you are in the world, maybe in North America or in Europe, you can still find some of those skill sets. But if you're talking remote places, in other parts of the world where it's not so easy to get these skills, it's a big concern. And that's where Husky's focused on and has really developed a lot of the intelligence into the equipment itself, becoming a lot more automated. So back to the pie chart of operational cost, we can see the second largest lever is labor. And when we look at operations, and depending where you are, if we're looking at an existing operation that could be 10 to 20 years old or older, depending on what those vintages of assets are, those are things that we look at when we come in and assess the plants. Likewise, if you're building a brand new facility and starting from a clean slate, those are opportunities where you can take advantage of new equipment installations and organizing the layout of the factory most convenient to minimize the amount of people you need to run that operation. So moving on to our next subject, which is really around the application. I think when we look at operational improvements from an injection molding, the application, well, everything starts with the application because that's how we connect with the consumers. The brand is ultimately putting their products in there. But there's tremendous opportunity. That's one of the wonderful things about PET, that there's always been a roadmap for lightweighting, for change, differentiation, functionality. And I think once these things are taken into account and you understand your roadmap for application development, you can line that up with your operational transformation for making improvements. And we'll talk about some of the things that are happening around the world. So we talked about PET and why we like it so much. At the end of the day, it's the circularity about it, the Ellen MacArthur Foundation. We're talking about, we don't want to pull more feedstock from the earth. We want to use that materials from fossil fuels to generate PET, transform it into a product, and then once we're done with that product, we want to be able to reuse, collect that material, recapture it, and reuse it again. And PET is a fantastic material for that, and that can go through the loop over and over again infinitely. So I thought I would just start from the vision or the pie in the sky type of view, and what we've shown here is kind of where we believe the beverage industry is going based on the feedback we have from our customers. They are looking for, well, how do I make my package more recyclable? So are there ways to eliminate the label? Labels can be seen as a contaminant to the recycle stream, the adhesives. How can I make that material a mono material? So in other words, the cap, we have a new technology, which I'll talk about in a bit, where it's a PET closure. So now the PET bottle and the cap is the same material. And of course, how do I lightweight that package? And ultimately, how do I incorporate more rPET? So we've taken all of those catalysts or information of what we've heard for the brands and where they want to go, and we started to integrate that and work on some technologies. So I thought I would share this example because I'm going to talk to each one of this. So I really a shout out to Coke. I think they've been doing a great job on their initiatives for sustainability. And here's just another area. So they've launched a label-free bottle. I think the first ones were actually in Korea, where the bottle was embossed. So they used some in the blow molds. You could see that the Coca-Cola was embossed. They still did have to have labeling for the ingredients and everything else. But what they launched last year in the UK was the Sprite bottle, and they referred to it as the naked bottle. And this is where they actually use two different technologies. They use the embossing, which you can see on the shoulder of the bottle where it says Sprite. And what, unfortunately from this image, it doesn't show, but I do have examples here that I can show. I don't know if everybody can see that or not, but they used a laser engraver to print or to burn into those bottles all the other characteristics so that they could eliminate the label. When we get into lasers and laser technology, there's a few different types of lasers, and depending on what you want to do, You know, it's understanding which is the appropriate laser, whether it's a CO2 laser or a fiber laser. You know, those are types of things that Husky has experience with. We have the equipment here, so we've done some testing, but we see this as a path forward. Other areas where companies are looking at is using lasers with additives. Well, how can I use the laser to activate an additive that might be in the material itself, so that once it's activated, it can enhance or promote whatever is the definition of what you wanted laser engraved. So we see that quite exciting. It's still in its very early stages, but I think there's lots of opportunity to grow, and that's an area that Husky's looking into as well. RPET, I don't think we need to talk too much here, but we can see that the brands have chosen some of their premium products where they've gone all in 100% recycled plastic. One of the things that we've been hearing from most of our customers and brands, you know, going 10%, 25% in your package, the consumers don't necessarily understand that, don't resonate. They only understand it's either fully recycled or it's not. And that's where we can see a lot of the brands have gone to that 100% movement with some of their premium brands. And of course, they've probably made that decision on their premium brands because that's where most of the margin is. And that why they can offset some of that premium that RPET commands over virgin. So great job to these brands. And then of course we can talk about lightweighting. Back to the pie chart where, you know, and I'll explain a little bit further. Lightweighting is still the biggest lever to offset costs, and I say costs of change, whether you're implementing RPET, you know, if you could lightweight that package and use less material overall, well, then you can offset some of that premium from RPET. Other ways, which I'll get into in the next slide, I think is we'll get into is if you're doing a neck finish change. So as an example, in Europe, they've gone through tethering. You know, that was very CapEx intensive. Any ways that you can strip out material from that existing package, and PET is a wonderful material because of its strength, there's always opportunities to reduce and optimize that material for that package. And that's a good way when we think about, you know, your molding operation, is how do I incorporate my roadmap of my SKUs, my packages, to align with any type of CapEx spend, because you want to make the most of that spend and you want to make sure that there's either an offset or a payback, and generally that comes through lightweighting the package. Just to give some more examples, you know, back to the cost, the transformational cost, the conversion cost, resin is the number one lever, and you can see it's 3/4 of the pie. And we just give some examples. You know, resin savings, again, depending how heavy that package is, will depend on how much resin you can pull out. But you can see there that there's significant savings on material, which aligns to less plastic being used, which is part of many sustainability goals. If you're using RPET, it reduces that premium. And ultimately, it's there's a roadmap there going forward for significant cost savings. So fourthly is tethered closure. I'm not going to spend too much time for the European audience. So, you know, that's been implemented as of last year, I think July 2024. But I think what is important is back to my earlier message that there was going to be significant CapEx investments to change the closures from the 1881 over to the GME, to a tethered closure. And in many instances, there was a decision that they made a change to move to a new neck finish, which was referred to as the GME 3040. And that's essentially a replacement of the 1881. The combination of the neck finish and the closure is approximately 2 grams of resin savings, and therefore that helps to offset the CapEx for making that investment. So Husky does have a portfolio of closure solutions. So we are not a closure provider. I'm not sure if everyone's aware of that. We are the equipment provider. So we would enable our customers, the converters who want to produce closures for themselves. These are all license free. That comes with the purchase of the equipment. So we have a variety of solutions, both in tethered and non-tethered, whether it be for carbonated beverages, for water, or for juices. By all means, reach out to us if this is something you're interested, and we can help you through that. And finally, the PET closure. To me, this is a new innovation that I'm super excited about. Now, you might say to me, well, we already have a closure that's HDPE, and yes, it's recycled. But if we go back to the vision of Ellen MacArthur and circularity, today, HDPE is not going back circular. It's being downgraded, which is nothing wrong with being downgraded. It's used for other things. But if we talk about, how do we use or limit the resources we're pulling from the earth, in order to make closures in HDPE, you're always using virgin plastic. If you convert to PET, it can enter the recycle stream. It's the same grade as the bottle, and therefore can be manufactured back into either bottles or closures. And the benefit there, and I don't know, I'm going to show an example. This is a tethered PET closure. This is a 29-25 neck finish, which is quite common in Europe. And we have the functionality to be meet the European legislation. And if you think about a recycler, one of the benefits is, they buy bales, and bales of PET are mostly PET, but there are other things in there such as HDPE. And when we talk about all those bottles coming back now in Europe because they're tethered, the bale yield now for PET has actually gone down in some cases. If you convert those closures to PET, then the bale yield will actually increase. So there's a positive side for the recyclers as well. And it just makes it simpler that we don't have to sort two different materials. So maybe it's not the right fit for everything, but I think we're in the step forward, and that's back to the circularity. So very excited about that project. We have one of our early adopters coming online. So you'll probably start to see those in the market by late Q4 2025. If you have any inquiries about that, please reach out to us as well. Okay, so let's talk about molding itself and the material. Kind of breaking this down into 4 sections, and most of it is material selection and quality, specifically when we talk about rPET. The technology that you're going to use to transform those pellets or flakes directly into preforms, how that process needs to monitor the infeed of those materials, because it's not like virgin, they are changing. And then just how we monitor the system from a predictive monitoring center. So when we talk about implementing rPET, it's really about risk mitigation. And what do I mean by that? I've mentioned it a few times throughout the webinar that, rPET is not like virgin. Virgin is very consistent because it's made from feedstock materials that are well known, well established into manufacturing that virgin material. When we talk about the production of rPET, it's really taking bottles from the market, and those bottles could be a mixture of water bottles, they could be a mixture of CSD, juices, there's additives in there, there's color in there, there's a lot of things. If you think about baking a cake as an example, there's a lot of ingredients that are going into that cake. And essentially, as those materials are going through the recycling systems, and the recycling systems do a good job, whether using LSP or SSP, of pulling those materials out, there's still going to be color variation or batch to batch inconsistency of those materials coming through. The recyclers do a great job of trying to make that as consistent as possible, but from recycler to recycler or rPET provider to rPET provider, we have seen significant variation. And even just in looking here in this picture, some have spherical pellets, some have the cylindrical pellets. So, a lot of things to consider when implementing rPET. Husky has a lot of experience in that. We can help you. We also have a grading system or an evaluation. So if you know that you're going to start implementing rPET in your facility, you can send samples of that material to Husky, and we will go through a grading system. It's not saying it's good or bad, but it's giving you characteristics of that material. And it could be as simple as color, it could be IV, the stability of the pellets themselves. And essentially we have an understanding of what that material looks like, so that when you're going getting prepared to run that material, whether it's you're buying a new tool and you want to run that mold here at Husky, we understand already ahead of time what to expect because we understand those characteristics. So that's a new service that Husky's been offering for, I think, a little over a year now. A lot of customers are taking advantage of that because just they don't understand what they're getting. And again, not all our pets are equal, even from vendor to vendor and batch to batch. So going beyond the material itself, and I think this is where the Husky technology, where we've really focused on, is trying to understand straight away from the in-feed, the pellets that are going in all the way to the end, which is the preforms. So understanding the journey, I'll call it, of that pellet as it goes through the dryer, as it goes into the extruder of the machine, as it's dispersed throughout the hot runner to each of the individual drops. Husky spent tremendous amount of effort here because we understand that our pet has a lot of variability. And if you're introducing variability to your injection molding process, what does that mean? It means the preforms coming out of the back end of the system will also be different potentially. And if we think about what comes after the injection molding process, which is the blow molding, the filling, the capping, if those preforms are coming out and they're different in color, the IV is changing, there's some inconsistencies, that's going to cause potential havoc on the blow mold machine. It's going to cause variability, and potentially it can cause scrap or lower OEEs. So if we think about the journey of that pellet, and our pet, a simple example, the dryer, you might say, well, we have an existing dryer, but generally with our pet, what we have found is we need to dry it at a lower temperature because we don't want to induce degrading of that material or yellowing. And if it takes longer, then we have to consider the hopper size. So maybe the hopper needs to get bigger. There's areas like that that we need to consider and think about as we're introducing these materials. I talked about the extruder. Husky has developed a new screw. I'm not going to get into the details of it, but essentially we used to offer two screws. One was for high mix, the other was for high throughput. We've actually been able to blend those two designs together so that you can have the highest throughput with the most blending. So that way you get a homogenized material flow coming through before it enters into the molding area. And then of course, multi-cavity molds. Currently, Husky has or will be launching at DrinkTech the 200 cavity molding system. Traditionally, we've been sitting in the 144 cavity, 160 cavity. We've moved to that next step, 200. So if you think about managing the flow front, managing that flow of material, that each and every single 1 through 200 has to be identical. They have to fill at the same rate. They have to have the same part weight, the same consistency. Hot runner design and technology around a hydraulic balance, a thermal balance is super critical because we want to ensure that as we're distributing that material to all 200 drops, coming out of the back end of that machine, you want them to be identical. Again, as we get higher in cavitation and we're using rPET, some of those rPETs do create a lot of dust or residue on the injection molding surface. We do also have a feature which we refer to as the self-cleaning mold, where it takes the manual cleaning process out, meaning you don't have to break cycle, stop, dry ice, and clean it. We actually have it integrated and automated in the system that you push a button and it can be, every 20,000 cycles, 30,000, it's really up to you as your need. But the goal of that is we've eliminated that cleaning time, that manual cleaning time. So therefore, the machine stays up and running. And what does that mean? It means you have more available hours to run production. So that's a technology that has been a big game changer, and especially with rPETs, we've seen that being very, very valuable. And then as we come out the back end of the machine, I mentioned it earlier about color. We do have a vision system on the back where we've integrated it as in a closed loop system where the preforms, not every single one of them, but it is done as a batch on the back end. It's roughly about 60% of each shot. We are measuring the color. And we're measuring it to a benchmark or a setting, and it's how far we're deviating away from that color. And what we've done is we've integrated a dosing unit up at the feed throat where if the preforms are starting to turn yellow because of more degraded or inconsistency of material, the system will recognize that it's deviated from your set point. It will automatically send a signal to the dosing unit to add in a blue toner to offset any of the yellowing, all in a closed loop fashion. And then of course the goal of it is to bring that color back in line with what your set point in. And this is all automated, and therefore, again, having very consistent preforms coming out of the back end. We've heard from customers that they've done it manually, and they'd come out, somebody would take a look at it, oh, I got to dose it, and they're constantly swinging back and forth. This gives you the ability to be much more in control of your process much earlier before things become visible notice to the human eye. The vision system can see things happening much earlier, and therefore limits the variation. I'm also excited to announce that we have a new drying system. So on the previous slide, you would have seen what's the traditional vertical hopper that sits on top of the machine. We've actually worked with PT Solutions on this, and it's a vacuum dryer. This has also been launched, I think, just earlier this year, late last year, where we're now using vacuum to evaporate most of the moisture in the material. And you can see there's 4 small chambers. And the benefit of these 4 chambers is essentially you're drying the material in batches. So we're bringing down the pressure through a vacuum, and therefore you can extract most of the moisture, and you can do that at low temperature. And if you recall earlier what I'd mentioned with rPET, it's very susceptible to heat, so the lower the temperature, the better. And then as it passes through chamber to chamber until it gets to that last chamber that's sitting on top of the feed throat of the injection molding machine is where you would bring up that heat to the 180 degrees Celsius so that it's ready to enter the injection molding process. So this is actually a tremendous, what's the right word here? There's a lot of characteristics here which you can take advantage of. Because we're breaking it down from one larger batch into smaller batches, we've been able to reduce the energy and also the maintenance. If we think back to the traditional dryer, if you're introducing rPET, generally you might have to introduce an oil condenser to get some of the debris and filaments out. Well, the desiccant beds would have to be cleaned a lot more. The oil condenser uses a significant amount of energy. With this drying system, it eliminates the need for that secondary process. So that's where a lot of the energy savings comes from. Also, if you're doing material changes frequently, maybe once a week or once every 2 weeks, the benefit of this drying system is you can actually shut off temporarily one of those 4 cells so that you can create a gap so that the material will continue to flow through. And then as there's a break in the one, you can already start to prepare your second material coming in. So that way you only have about a 2-hour gap between changeover versus the older hopper style, you might have 6 or 7 hours of material in there that you would need to cool down or flush out, clean out, load in the new batch, and bring that temperature or bring that material up to temperature. So this has a significant time saving advantage when we're talking about material changes. And the other benefit is it's configurable. So right now we have a 2x2, but if you think about maybe you have an existing operation where you have very low ceiling height because you're expanding a new machine, you don't want to cut a hole through the ceiling. This can be figured where 2 of the dryers are positioned beside the machine on the floor. They could be stacked 4 on top. It really is configurable to match the operational footprint. So very excited about this. And this complements our whole rPET strategy for a system level. So again, if anybody's interested on that and want to talk more, we can talk much deeper in that. Another area is we have system or screens on the HMI for the operator to use that are dedicated for rPET processing. And we focused in a few key areas so that the operator on one screen can get full visibility to what's happening in that process. Do I do I need to do anything? Do I need to adjust anything? This is all done on one screen. They get closed loop feedback. They also have a dosing unit on top. You know, if they need to blend in different levels of rPET, all of that information on a closed loop feedback is visible on one screen. So there's a lot of intuitive knowledge that has been built in. And again, it's to simplify uh, the user experience, that they don't have to be an expert to go up on top of the machine and make adjustments. It can all be done through the HMI. And then finally, our monitoring system. It's a product that we refer to, we branded, it's called Advantage Plus Elite. And essentially this is now the connectivity of that system in your facility with Husky at one of our 7 remote monitoring centers around the world. So what does that mean? What it means is we have the ability to receive, I think it's over 350 variables of information of that machine that's running in your facility. It goes up to the cloud, it's secure there, but we have experts in that monitoring center that are understanding all the inputs we're receiving. And we have, through AI, logarithms, through skill sets, that we monitor the processing of the equipment to see if something is deviating from the benchmark or the set points that you've set. And if we think about, you know, introducing maybe another batch of rPET that comes in, maybe the machine starts to wander, the extruder can't process the material the same, or one of the heater bands is dropped off, we will start to see those variables in our screens, and it's an opportunity for us to connect directly with the customer, whether it's through an email, it could be a phone call, there's a whole escalation process, but we are actually in tune live with the data that's going on with the machine in our customers' facilities. So this has actually been well received. We have over 2,000 machines currently hooked up on this. And if we think about back to the labor shortage or skilled labor shortage, you know, running an injection molding machine, or even, you know, up and downstream equipment, which is, we're also potentially working with our partners to expand this because we've received such well feedback, is we're enabling the workforce at the customer's facility to leverage our resources back at the OEM to help mitigate and fix problems, whether it's before they happen or if they happen. We can diagnose it, and even if it gets to a severe troubleshooting issue, we actually inform our service technicians with all the pre-data that we've learned ahead of time, so they understand what the problem is before they even get on site. They may have to order parts ahead of time, whatever the issue may be, but they're already armed with the appropriate tools so that when they end up at your facility, they know what the problem is, they know what to do, the parts are already there, and they can work directly with their customers. So this has been a tremendous tool that our customers are leveraging. I'm very excited that this has come out, because really what it's about is just having someone watch over your operations, and just helping you to, you know, that you want to get the best performance, the highest OEE out of your equipment. And that's really what this is designed to do. And then I think summing up everything that we've talked about, whether it be energy, labor, your SKUs, your application roadmap, we refer to this as factory planning. We have a team here at Husky. I talk about it more as operational transformation. This team really is incredible. They will come into your facility. If it's an existing facility that, you know, it could be 10, 20 years old, you could have very old assets, you could have a mishmash of, you know, different vintages, you're going through a growth spurt. This team would actually come in and work directly with your team, do an audit to understand, well, what's the current state of your facility? And once they understand what's happening there, then they can benchmark it against what a best-in-class scenario could look like. And that could be all the way from your applications, because people are always wondering, what's the lightest I can go to, you know, what's out there in the market, and how do we incorporate all the SKUs and volumes onto a best-in-class asset base. And once you understand where you are today and what could be where you want to go, we would build a plan to help get you to where you want to end up. And in many cases, it could be a 3 to 5 year transformational plan. There could be some assets that you want to retire and replace with new. There's other assets that you might want to upgrade because they're not that old, and there's different things that Husky can offer to give performance enhancements. And then, how do we use some of those parts from some of the older tools or sort of the older machines that we've decommissioned. There could be some others because there's obsolescence in parts. So there's a whole plan strategy that this team would work with our customers. And I really implore everyone to take advantage of that if you're thinking about, how do I make improvements at the plant level, whether I'm going to expand, how do I improve my operational efficiency. This team has over 30 years of experience, and I've worked with them closely on many, many projects. And I can tell you, it's always exciting to see what they come out with. So on that, I can share a few quick examples. Here was a brand in Europe that was looking to integrate rPET through a recycling facility. And they came to us and we leveraged the factory planning team. So what you would see at the top was essentially the building that was empty. In the middle was a rendering as to, how we would lay the machines out, how we would integrate it with the up and downstream equipment. I can't show that. But then the bottom picture is ultimately what the facility ended up looking like. So we had a person on site working directly with them and with all of the up and downstream OEMs, coordinating all the efforts with them, with their teams, making sure that they were on track, making sure that, the plans were being managed, the equipment was put in properly, and managing the timeline. So that was a very successful startup where the team, helped out with designing a completely new plant. We have another example here where an existing company in Latin America, they had an existing floor plan, but they wanted to introduce rPET. And so that was new to them. And again, they had to think about dryer sizes. Is it time to replace those dryers? How can we leverage the DRV? Again, the team came in and they looked at it and they helped them walk through what those throughput requirements would be using rPET, using the process parameters, the rPET grading, and essentially was able to lay out and work with them so that they could implement the rPET, bring it in through different areas. And the last business case here, again, a little bit similar to the first one, but this is in the Middle East. Again, so the customer was moving their operations, I think they had 12 PET machines and 8 closure machines from an existing plant where the equipment was just laid out. How should I say? It grew as their business grew, so things weren't laid out, let's say, in a proper process, in a flow mechanism. They were just kind of laid out wherever they had space. The team came in, they saw what they were dealing with, they laid out a proper floor plan and essentially dedicated where each of the machines would go, and therefore, had the silos, had the material preparation, where the parts would come off the back end, and aligned with the with all the downstream equipment. So I really encourage anyone who's thinking about growing, expanding, or optimizing to reach out to our factory planning team. They do have a plethora of knowledge. They have over 30 years experience doing this, and I absolutely believe that they could help with you if you have any questions. So wrapping that up, because we're just under the hour, and I did want to leave some questions here. I did want to note, if anybody is going to Drink Tech, that's over in Germany. It's on September 15th through 19th. If anybody wants to join, you can click on the QR code here. That would get you your entrance ticket. And by all means, I will be there myself. If anybody wants to stop by, we'd be more than happy to answer any questions and show you around our booth. So thank you for your time today. Sorry about the glitch that happened a little earlier today, but we managed through it, and I'm glad that you could stay through for the meeting. And I'll just open it up to any questions.
Yes, thank you very much, Steve, for a really interesting presentation and for handling the glitch so well as well. But yeah, All fine. So yeah, now it's time for the Q&A section of these sessions. We've had some great questions through already. Please, but please keep them coming. And if we don't get to your question, then I'm sure our speaker will be happy to answer your question after the session as well. So the first question we had, just a second, find the questions, was somebody's asking what process is used to make rPET food safe?
So the well, there's a lot of providers out there. So NGR, Starlinger, Urema. I mentioned it earlier. Those technologies, whether it's using SSP, solid state polymerization, or LSP, liquid state polymerization, two different technologies. They are let's call it the leaders in recycling the material. You know, Husky is a receiver of what comes out of those products, and ultimately it's those technologies which are ensuring that all the contaminants and like carcinogens and everything is extracted from the material, and they actually have to go through the FDA process to ensure it's food grade stable. Husky's not doing that. It's one of the recyclers that would do that.
That makes sense.
And if you need help with finding them out, Husky does work with all of them, and we'd be more than happy to introduce you if needed.
Thank you. And somebody else is asking, I suppose PET bottles are easy to recycle. How about other food service products such as clamshells, cups, sandwich boxes, etc.? Those could be contaminated with grease, etc. So yeah, asking about those.
Correct. Yeah. So they're talking about clamshells, which are typically thermoformed. They also use a much lower IV PET. From a recycler standpoint, yes, those are seen as a contaminant, and generally they have to be separated out. Again, depending geographically where you are, what's the capability of the recycler. Some recyclers now have streams to deal with it, others do not. It's really very regional, and you'd have to talk to your local recycler as to how they deal with it. But I think it's becoming more and more what's the right word I'm looking for? The recyclers see it as an opportunity, and really it just comes down to volume. If there's enough volume of it, they set up a recycling line for it. But in many cases, it's separated out, and then it's either burned or landfilled, unfortunately.
Okay, thank you. Somebody else was asking us, can your existing high PET system run rPET material? So
the answer is yes. You know, essentially, any machine will run the material. The difference is you might have deficiencies. And what do I mean by that? It could be that you know, the closed loop feedback that we have isn't available on some of those earlier generation machines, and therefore you would need to rely on the skill of your operators. But most definitely rPET can be used on a high PET machine in older generation. It's just you have to rely much more on your operators to navigate any deviations they might see on the back end, or you know, through the dryer system. But the answer is yes.
Great, thank you. And another question we had in was, how do you benchmark or assess an existing factory?
Okay, so that's a great question. So essentially, what we do is, well, there's two methods that we use. One is we would go in and understand what your current footprint is, what's the vintage of the machine, what you're running, and then we would benchmark that against what is our most current equipment or platforms. So theoretically, if you were to take all the SKUs that you have and put them on the newer equipment with higher cavitation, that would kind of be the one goal post that we'd say, this is the best you could possibly had if you had infinite money and you could throw your old facility away. What it does, it identifies the gap as to where you are today and where the next best scenario is. So if you had a competitor coming in and they started from scratch, they would be buying this equipment. It gives you an idea as to how far away you are from where, you know, the best next alternative could be. But aside from that, what we also do is, because we've done so many of these studies and we keep them all anonymous, is we would put your data into a pool of all the existing audits that we've done around the world, and we would benchmark it to what we call best in class. So again, we're trying to say, okay, well, the theoretical world is nice to have, but what's really happening out there? And we don't give names or anything like that, but we would just assess it to the aggregate to say, well, in your region, based on the audits that we've done, this is kind of how you would compare in that region to other operations, you know, whether it's in your geography or if you wanted us to compare it to just best in class anywhere in the world. That's really how we would do it. Because once we understand where you are and what you're up against, that's how we build the roadmap or the plan, the transformation plan to get you from where you are to where you want to be. So great question.
Great, thank you, Steve. So yeah, I think that's all we've got time for today. Thank you everybody for joining us. Obviously, if you have, if we didn't get to your question today, or if you have any more questions to ask, you can send in the questions, or of course you can take the opportunity to speak to Husky Technologies and to Steve in person at Drink Tech in Munich from 15th to 19th December.
Or you can find me on LinkedIn, and if you want to reach out, I'd be more than happy to connect with you.
Absolutely.
And if you have any questions, you know, by all means, reach out. More than happy to talk to you.
Absolutely, yes. Perfect. So yeah, this webinar will also be available on demand within the next couple of days, and you'll be sent a link to access it in case you want to recap on anything you've seen in today's session. So yeah, we hope you enjoyed the webinar today, and that just leaves me to thank our speaker, Steve Koenig, for a really interesting presentation and answering the questions. And thank you everybody for watching. Thanks very much.
Thank you very much.